what we find is that by taking advantage of that novice effect, we can give somebody the most rapid progress that they're going to see in their entire training career. And taking advantage of that, anything short of taking full advantage of that is essentially wasting the person's
Mm.
time. You only have so much time to do this stuff. And if we can make a strength increase, then we should.
Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today, I'm joined by Cody Annino, a starting strength coach based out of Moodus, Connecticut, about an hour south of me, which is why I reached out to him a few years back when I was first learning about starting strength and I needed some coaching on my basic lifts. He's the reason I started squatting and pressing the right way after months of frustration, and why I'm always saying on the show that everyone would benefit from a technique coach, even for a few sessions. I invited him on to talk about the transformative power of barbell training. You'll learn the principles and benefits of starting strength, some common misconceptions about strength training, and the crucial novice effect. We'll compare different training methods, look at how barbell training impacts mental health, and touch on the future of online versus in person coaching in the fitness world. Cody is a big believer in the power of strength for lifelong health and resilience, as am I, which is an important message everyone needs to hear. Cody is the owner and operator of Annino Strength and Conditioning, a small family-owned black iron gym in Central Connecticut. Cody is a Central Connecticut State University graduate and has been working full-time as a professional coach since 2016. He has experience helping people of all ages and ability levels become stronger and healthier through barbell training. Cody, man, I really appreciate it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's get to know you first, right? You've been a professional coach for since 2016. You run your own gym. We mentioned you're a starting strength coach. You're also a USA powerlifting coach.
Yep.
How did strength and lifting become part of your life?
So I've always been into, training and exercise like my whole life, probably starting in high school. I ran track, cross country. Out of high school, I was kind of looking for a way to pay for college, so I started working as a personal trainer and worked at a commercial gym and did that for a long time. I liked it. I started getting into CrossFit. Had a few issues with that, but yeah, one thing led to another, and I just got more and more into the barbell and strength training, and yeah, that's how I. It was a long process, but that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, I get it, man. And it's funny, it seems like we all find CrossFit at some point in that journey before we get away from it. It's funny. Now you're focused on barbell training. I know you're powerlifting coaching as well. When did you discover, with all the different things you had tried
Yep.
and learned from track to cross country to CrossFit to everything, that it was more than just another way of working out, but it was this new transformational thing, this thing that could transform your health, your strength, your life. When did you make that connection?
I mean, so it developed kind of over time as I found starting strength, and really the way I found starting strength was again going back to CrossFit. Because CrossFit, the one of the things that was lacking in my education up to that point as a personal trainer, as a CrossFit coach, was my ability to teach people how to do the lifts. And I found starting strength and I used it early on. I found it so that I could teach people how to do lifts like the snatch and the power clean. And it was so simple. It was very easy to it was very approachable for a lot of people who have never touched a barbell before, and just got more and more excited about it, and I'm like wanted to learn more and more about this method. So then learned about Mark Rippetoe, read the book, and yeah, and then as I started using this method with people, you start to see the effect that it has on people, of all different levels. You got young guys come into the gym, kids, they get strong. They can get a college, by strength training and getting better at their sport. And then you can also take older people who we've had people come to the gym, with a walker, and they're
Mhm.
struggling and they regain their physical independence through strength training. So there's a huge benefit to this stuff for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you mentioned is very important is that it was simple. And I think that's important to mention because if you buy Starting Strength and you read it, it's very detailed. It can be dry at times. I like it. I like the science and the biomechanics behind it, all the diagrams. But like the chapter on the squat is, I don't know, 40 pages long. And I actually tell people that as a positive about it because you actually learn the proper way to squat and why it works. But some people are intimidated, right? Barbells seem like this maybe inaccessible thing, or there's safety and they're worried that, people are going to be judging them, or they don't have a spotter, or all these other reasons people throw out. But you said it's simple. So emphasize that point for us. Like, why is it simple?
Yeah. Training with barbells is simple. It's a basic tool. And when someone's trying to start a program, any program really, I mean, the hardest part is just getting them to come into the gym, when people walk into like a commercial gym, they can be overwhelmed by how much stuff is in there. There's machines, there's cardio equipment, there's bands, there's millions of people in there. There's all kinds of, and they don't know where to start. And the barbell is a great place to start because strength is kind of the foundation of everything in your day-to-day life, and the barbell is the best tool to develop strength. So the program is very simple that we do. We teach 5 basic exercises, and we have a method for teaching people to do the exercises. And what we find through experience, and through doing this with lots and lots of people, is there's a starting point for everybody.
Mhm.
No matter where you are, we can find something that you can do. We can start you somewhere with a barbell, and that might mean using a really light barbell. We got 10-pound bars. You might only use the empty bar, something like that. But there's always a starting point, and that's one of the benefits to kind of working with a coach. Is we could start you on this journey, and go from there.
All right, cool. And that broke it down really well. I like that you said the barbell is the best tool for the job, because I know some people will equivocate on, like, well, you can do body weight, you could do bands, you could build up, and then eventually do dumbbells and barbells. I don't know about you,
Yeah,
like, I'm lazy and I want to be efficient and go right for whatever saves me the most time and gets me the most strength. And that's kind of the principle I use when I explain it to people. And unless they just absolutely have no access whatsoever for some legitimate reason, why not
right.
try the barbell? So help us understand. You said 5 movements. Break down the key principles, the benefits of starting strength. Just kind of like, what would be your sales pitch for why this is an effective program?
So starting strength, the benefit to it is that it's a systemic approach to barbell training. That we base on a series of concepts, like we can, I don't know how deep you want to go into, like stress recovery, adaptation,
Mhm.
and all that sort of stuff. But the basic exercises would be like the squat, the bench press, the deadlift, the power clean, and the press. Some people don't do the power clean depending on their age or injury history, but they're large compound exercises that are basic human movement patterns, and we're basically just adding load to them. And through those 5 exercises, you're able to strengthen the entire body. And like you said, it's time efficient, because if you're not someone that has all day to spend in the gym, you can get started with these basic exercises, get a whole lot done, build a lot of muscle, build a lot of strength in a very short period of time, and get on with your day and on with your life.
Yeah. So you just listed off some really good principles. It's systemic, right? We actually
Mhm.
have something that builds over time that makes sense. It's logical. It's basic compound lifts. We talk about a lot of this on the show. Full human movement patterns, full range of motion, and you're just adding load, which is important because some people, they will make people will make excuses about certain movements for whatever reason in their history. And when you
Mhm.
say, well, can you squat to a box, or can you squat down without a bar? If you
Mhm.
can, you probably can squat with load. And like you said, it's
Right.
just adding the load over time. Stress recovery adaptation. We can get into that a little bit. I think it's very fundamental to this. Um,
Yeah.
I always return to the starting strength ideas, at least, even if it's not the exact program. I always return to it when things change in my life and I detrain, or I take an unintentional deload, or recently I had left rotator cuff surgery, so I had to take a break, and now I'm getting back to it. Those principles, I come back to them and they always apply. So tell us about stress recovery adaptation.
So stress recovery adaptation is one of those first principles, like I talked about before, that the method is kind of based on. So it's a biological principle. Hans Selye is the person, I believe, who first kind of discovered this in the 30s. I think it was called like general adaptation syndrome or something to that effect. Basically, the idea is that if you stress an organism, it will adapt to that stress. It'll adapt specifically to that stress, assuming it's not too much stress all at once. One of the common, most basic ways that we explain to people is the idea of a suntan, right? So
Mhm.
if you go out in the sun, you decide that you don't want to be really pale and white like me. You go out in the sun.
Well,
I don't know, maybe the first day you do 20 minutes or so out there and you might get a little bit pink, a little bit red, but then, a day or two later, you'll be slightly more tan. Your body is adapting to the stress of you being out in the sun. And let's say you do that every day for the week, you go out there for 20 minutes. And then at the end of the week, you're going to be tanner than you were at the start of the week. And this is like trick question we tell people at the seminars, like, so then what happens if you tell yourself, okay, if 1 week I was able to do that with only 20 minutes a day, what if I do that every day for the whole summer? I go out for 20 minutes and that's it. 20 minutes, come back in. I'm going to be super tan by the end of the summer, right? And the answer to the question is actually no. You're only going to be tan enough to tolerate 20 minutes of sun exposure.
Mm.
So in order to get more tan, you have to actually spend more time in the sun and build it up progressively over time, right? So that's kind of the really basic way of explaining this stress recovery adaptation process in a way that everybody can understand.
Yeah.
Likewise, you can overdo it too, right? So if I go out the first day and I sit out in the sun for 3 hours, I'm not going to really adapt to that stress. I'm going to get burned and it's going to be horrible, right? So we take that concept and we apply it to strength training. When you first come into the gym, we find a spot, we find something that you can do, something that's tolerable, at a weight that is something that you can learn how to do the technique correctly, but it's not so heavy that it's going to destroy you. It's not going to make you terribly, terribly sore. It's not going to hurt you, and that's different for everybody. You get a 65-year-old woman that comes in, that might be her body weight. It might be a 10-pound, 15-pound bar. If you got a young high school kid, he might do 135, 155 the first day that he comes in, and then we'll gradually build that up over time. So we're
Yeah.
we're exposing the body to a little bit more stress each workout, and then you give yourselves enough time to recover between bouts of stress, and we adapt accordingly.
Yeah, I
So
think I
hopefully I
think that's
explained
a
that well.
that you did. That's a beautiful concept. I love the suntan principle. And when you talk about the weight that you start with, like if you're a newbie listening to this, if you've never done it before, this is why working with a coach can be really helpful. When I went to see Cody, I'm a man, I was in my 30s, have a little bit of an ego, and he saw me kind of trying to maybe push a little too much. And he's like, here, let's dial it back. It's all good. Like, let's go
Yeah.
with the weight that makes sense for you so that the form is solid and you can handle it. And then from there, okay, you've got it dialed in. Now you start increasing the load and, sky's the limit. So
Yeah.
really nice concepts. What are some of the criticisms you hear? Because I know there are a lot and about starting strength that you really want to address.
I mean, probably the most pervasive one is that we want everybody to be either there's probably two. One is that we want everybody to be overweight and drink like a gallon of milk a day. That's a pretty common one. Or another one that people say is, not everybody wants to be a power lifter or something like that. And we're not powerlifting. We're strength training. We're doing exercises that powerlifters do, but that doesn't mean that we're training for the sport of powerlifting. Powerlifting is a specific sport that we would,
Mhm.
that some people decide that that's the avenue they want to go. But we do these exercises, and yes, there's some overlap to the powerlifting exercise, but we do these exercises because again, they're basic human movement patterns. The barbell is an extremely ergonomical tool, meaning it's easy to hold on to. It's easy to, put on someone's back. It's incrementally loadable, more so than any other tool in the gym. I literally have quarter-pound plates at the gym. You can go up in really small increments. So, that's that whole idea of we want everybody to be a powerlifter is ridiculous. We just want people to be stronger than they are because we know that when people get stronger, they're also healthier. They get elderly people lots of times when they get stronger. And then like the other one is we want everybody to drink a gallon of milk a day. We want everybody to, be fat. That's a common
Yeah.
misconception about
Yeah.
starting strength. And it's just not true. If someone is underweight, we're going to tell them that you likely need to eat more calories and put yourself in some sort of surplus so that you can build muscle and continue to add weight to the bar. But, the opposite happens for people who maybe come to the gym and maybe they got a little bit of weight to lose. They start doing the program and they get stronger. They start increasing they start eating a more protein in their diet. They start, naturally eating a little bit less sugar and things like that. And in the process of them doing the program without even thinking about it, they start getting leaner and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's really true, and I think a lot of those criticisms are either a misunderstanding of the program or people who didn't follow it, who are like, "Hey, this is not working like I thought." The GOMAD is funny because when I first ran Starting Strength back in like 2020, when I met you, I was actually running Starting Strength for the first time and took that a little bit to heart, not the whole gallon, but maybe like a quarter to half gallon of milk a day. And I gained a ton of weight, and probably 40 pounds in like 4 or 5 months. For me, it was a lot,
Yeah.
but it helped me push the numbers up. I mean, it really did. And later I learned, nutrition and protein and like,
I
controlling my
mean, the
macros.
gallon of milk works. It works.
It
It's just
it
not for
works.
everybody.
No, and Rip even talks about it not being for,
No.
older people. All right, here's another concept about this. I just talked to my client and lifting buddy Tony Perry. He was on the last episode of the show. And one thing he talked about was to embrace the grind and enjoy the kind of the gritty process of strength training, right? There's a commitment involved, even though at the same time I do see the results speak for themselves and tend to motivate people. How do you get people to commit to that long-term process?
It can be hard to do that because this thing, like we said, it's very simple, but simple's not easy. And it can be hard for a lot of people. So what tends to happen a lot is people get really excited about the program because again, it's a very simple, very approachable program. We have a really good system to get people doing the lifts correctly in a fairly short period of time, and they realize those really quick adaptations. We call it the novice effect. In the very beginning, they come in and they're excited. They did 45 pounds on the first day, then they did 50, then they did 55, then they did 60, and so on. And then all of a sudden there comes a time where you go to unrack that bar and then you're like, oh my God, this is real heavy. I don't know if I can do this. And again, that's where some of these other benefits of strength training come into effect, where it's like, there's a lot of mental toughness that goes
Mhm.
into making yourself do something that you're not sure if you can actually do it. You're going to go down into the bottom of that squat and it's scary. You don't know if you're going to come back up. And some people do really well with that, like they push themselves, and then other people, as soon as they get into that where it's really hard and you got to grind, you got to push through it, some people just can't do it, and that's where, sometimes you have these people don't want to continue training. That's where they start looking to do other things. And so like, it can be hard as a coach to kind of push them through that. And lots of times it's just it's explaining to them that, you know, one, nothing bad's going to happen to you. Most likely, you're going to be fine. If you go down to the bottom of the squat, and if you don't come back up, so what? You're going to learn something about yourself either way. So yeah, telling people that can be a good strategy, but some people it's just really hard to get them to do it. We do have some churn in the program when it comes to
Mm.
when people start to reach that point where things get really hard.
Yeah, I could see that because it definitely starts to not so much plateau. It's just the incremental increases start to drop a bit, even though you can still
Mhm.
be making progress. It's interesting. You mentioned getting down into the squat. Worst case, you're going to learn about yourself. What is your answer to someone who's just getting started and they say, "But coach, what do I do if I fail the reps?" Like, and it's kind of a trick question. I want to see how you answer. But what do I do when I fail the reps? When I don't get all the reps? What's your answer to that question?
So, well, there's different ways to approach that, right? So, the first is, and if you're working with a coach, this should already be taken care of for you. The first is but if you're not working directly with a coach every single day, the first is you got to figure out why you're missing. And so we use what we call the first three questions. And those first three questions are: how big of jumps are you taking? Are you going up in reasonable increments? Are you going up 5 pounds, 2.5 pounds? Do you have the right equipment to go up in those small increments? Because when you're doing presses and bench presses, you can't go up 5 pounds. You might only be able to go up a pound or two. So making sure your jumps are appropriate. Sometimes people get stuck real quick because they're excited about the program. They like the rapid progress, and they're adding 10, 15, 20 pounds to the bar every time, and then they get stuck. So that's one issue. Another issue is they might not be resting long enough, between
Mhm.
their sets. Because when you're first getting started with the program, again, the weights are not super heavy, so you might be able to do 2 or 3 minutes between sets. It's not super difficult. You get back under the bar and you do all your sets, and it's no big deal. When the things start getting heavier, you're going to have to push those rest periods out, right? And then the last, just make sure that you're getting recovered between your sessions. Are you eating appropriately? Are you sleeping appropriately? Do you have a lot of life stress, work stress going on? All of those things can interrupt the recovery portion of the stress recovery adaptation cycle.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure that those things are in check first, right? To avoid missing. Then the other things, you know, if you are in a situation where you're going to miss the weight, again, it comes down to making sure you have proper equipment. So you can use safety pins. Most quality squat stands or squat racks are
Mhm.
going to have pins or bars that stick out that, if you get into trouble in the bottom, you can set the bar down. That would be your option. But again, the best option is to avoid putting yourself in that situation in the first place where, like, what do I do if I miss? It's like, well, if the coach is doing his job and you're doing your job of getting recovered between sessions, we want to keep you out of that position as much as possible.
Yeah, and that's right. And I knew you would go there as a good starting strength coach at the end. Is like, don't miss the reps. Like, let's
Right.
set yourself up for success rather
Mhm.
than assuming failure before you even get there. Which I love that, because having that mentality, and I've kind of carried that with me as well to this day. When something feels really hard, and you just don't feel great that day, but you've done everything you can. Just try it. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
You might see what you're made of when you do
Yeah.
that.
You don't know until you
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah, it's so true, and sometimes you feel like you've done three reps and the fourth one's impossible, and you get the fourth rep, and the
Yep.
fifth one seems impossible, and you do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Happens all the time.
Happens all the time. So when someone comes in to your gym, what are the most common assumptions or misconceptions they might have? Are people that are seeking you out already familiar with starting strength, or is it kind of a mix of individuals?
Most of the time, no, they're not
Okay.
familiar with what starting strength is. And you got all those standard industry fears, that people
Mm,
have when they first come in, especially since majority of our clientele tends to be female and it tends to be a little bit older in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And all that usual stuff where they're intimidated of lifting heavy weights, they're afraid they're going to get too bulky, that sort of thing. So, again, creating an environment where they feel comfortable, they feel like this is safe, and having the right type of equipment to accommodate and meet that person where they are,
mhm.
at their current ability level,
Yeah, for sure.
having light enough weights and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And again, folks listening, at least when I went to see Cody, he made sure we were using the right plates and the right equipment, and everything was set up right. He asked about my shoes, asked about a whole bunch of things just to make sure,
Mhm.
even my shirt, you wearing a cotton shirt or is it a more slippery shirt, like
Yep.
all the advice. So somebody coming in that's new, they're going to be a novice, they're a newbie, and so they're going to experience something called the novice effect, which I've
Mhm.
talked about enough times on the show probably, but it's a central concept to starting strength, and you mentioned the stress recovery adaptation model. Why is it so important, especially for those new or detrained to lifting, and how can someone make the most out of it?
So the novice effect it's that getting back to that stress recovery adaptation cycle. It's a phenomenon where when you're truly unadapted to something, you experience rapid progress early on in the progression of you trying to do this new thing. And then there's a law of diminishing returns, right? Where over time,
Hmm.
that progress starts to slow down. But the novice effect is that when someone comes into the gym for the first time, we can apply a small dose of stress to them with the barbell, teach them how to do the movements correctly, safely. And then within 48 to 72 hours later, they can come back into the gym and we can add a little bit more weight to the bar, a little bit more weight to whatever it was that they did on that first day. And amazingly enough, they can do it. And then another 48 to 72 hours will elapse and we can add a little bit more weight to it and they can do that again. And what we find is that by taking advantage of that novice effect, we can give somebody the most rapid progress that they're going to see in their entire training career. And taking advantage of that, anything short of taking full advantage of that is essentially wasting the person's
Mm,
time. You only have so much time to do this stuff. And if we can make a strength increase, then we should.
yeah. What's something you shouldn't be doing if you're trying to get the most out of it? One that comes to mind as a nutrition coach is you shouldn't be dieting personally if you're trying to do
Mhm.
that. What are some of those in your arsenal?
So again, so to take true full advantage of it, we recommend that you just do the program the way it's written, in that you're going to squat, bench, deadlift, press, and do your power cleans, and you're going to do those on alternating days. You're going to do them 3 days a week, and you're not really going to add a whole bunch of other stuff to it. You're not going to try to reinvent the wheel. You're not going to do CrossFit. You're not going to try to do, well, can I do my BJJ in between, or what should I do on my rest day? Should I run? All that stuff. Can I do yoga? And if you want to get everything you can out of it, you shouldn't do those things. But sometimes people do those things.
Sure. Something like
Yeah.
3% of people actually follow the program
Right.
when they looked at the
Yeah.
data. But I get it, because yeah, I have clients all the time. They're like, "Well, I want to keep running and I want to keep doing this." I'm like, You can. I mean,
Right.
it's trade-offs. It's all trade-offs."
Exactly. It's all trade-offs. Some people find that, I found too that if I tell people, if I don't be super restrictive with it and tell them, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do any
Yeah,
of this stuff, you got to just come in here and do this, that sometimes they don't really like that, and that kind of
sure.
turns them off, and they're less likely to come back to training. So if I tell them, okay, keep doing that stuff, that's fine. Because in the beginning, the Novice Effect works so well. The program works so well that even if
Yeah,
you kind of do it wrong, it still works.
it's true.
Um, so it works so well that they continue to make progress. And then eventually they hit a point where it's like they're not really getting recovered. And then I can kind of reapproach the conversation with them again and be like, well, you are running 3 days a week, or you are doing BJJ two
Yeah.
days a week. Maybe cut back on that a little bit, and then we can continue to push these weights up a little bit higher. And then some people, like, they have the right mentality where they want to keep chasing those numbers. So then
Yeah.
they start to be a little more strict with the program.
Yeah, and you have the data and feedback there to say, "Look, you're hitting a plateau. Let's remove this, see what happens." All of a sudden they improve. Then they get that intrinsic motivation of, "Okay, maybe I don't want to be running. I want to
Right,
make
right, right.
progress." So another topic related to training, especially since we're coming up to Men's Mental Health Month, November, is, and not just for men, but how does barbell training improve your mental health?
I mean, I've seen with several clients over the years that just they're meant just, I don't know if I know exactly like the scientific explanation for
Mhm.
how it improves people's mental health, but you just see it when someone starts getting stronger. They get more confident. A lot about their demeanor, a lot about their personality changes. And again, a lot of it gets back to, like we talked about with the doing that heavy set of five, and you're not sure if you can do that fifth rep, but there's something that happens to somebody when they consistently make that decision that I'm going to go down into the bottom of this squat, and I'm just going to see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to try real hard, and I'm going to give it everything I got, and I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. And there's a confidence component that comes from that, and it's hard to describe it to someone who hasn't done it before. But once you've gone through the process, once you've seen other people go through the process, I mean, you can see it. It's clear as day, the effect that this has on people's mental health in a positive way.
I think it's important. You're right. You kind of know it when you see it. And in my personal experience, it happens at different levels. Like it can happen right away in the first few weeks for somebody who's never trained before, and it just seems like they're gaining massive strength. And then it happens later when you hit these sticking points.
Right.
It'd be cool if they can like do a brain scan on people like before and after, to see what, if that hardship that, unlocks something like, with the brain chemistry or something. But yeah, I always like to ask that because people underestimate all the benefits of strength training. We focus so much on the strength and the muscle and things like that, and yet this, I'm coming in my older years to realize, is one of the top reasons people might want to consider this, because for whatever reason their anxiety is rampant, depression is
Hmm.
rampant, like across the population. And it could just be stress, it could be because you get older, you get obligations and all that. And I just wanted to pick your brain on that. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
cool. Yeah. Okay, so what about when you teach somebody to lift, because this was an important aspect of my experience with you. I came in having been squatting for like, I don't know, 3, 4 months on Starting Strength. I read the book. I'm the type of person, I read it like 3 times. I had highlighter. I had notes. I would practice in my living room. My wife would be like, "What are you doing down there?" And I would watch the videos, and not just Starting Strength, but Barbell Logic and some of the others, and did everything I possibly could, and I still didn't really have great form, because when I
Yeah.
met you, you like, there were 20 things that you had to fix. It really is a very tactile, technical thing. How do you teach it to your clients? What are the kind of the common cues you use, and is it how can people at home, even if they don't have a coach, and I know that's like you want them to have a coach, figure it out? How can they figure it out?
So, this might not be the most satisfying answer, but everybody's different, right? So, and what we find though sometimes is that the people who have been trying to do this thing, or maybe they did like high school football might be the worst thing ever, but they've lifted weights. You get guys that come to the gym, they've been lifting, they've done something, and they have the most bad habits. So they're the ones
Mm,
that are often the hardest ones to coach to correct those things because they've been doing things, I don't want to say wrong, but they've been doing them suboptimally for a long time.
right.
Whereas you get someone that comes in the door that's maybe even a little scared of lifting weights, never done this before, no idea what they're doing. They tend to be pretty easy to coach because they're going to do whatever you tell them. They don't have
All
any
their
bad
trust is in
habits.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. But so we have in Starting Strength, we have a series of teaching models for all of the lifts. We've distilled down over many years and trial and error and working with lots of people. We've kind of distilled down the best way to break these exercises down and explain them to people. So we have a teaching phase for all of the lifts where we teach them how to do the exercises, and then the cues are specific to the teaching model. So cues are reminders for somebody how to do the lifts, right? So we've already taught them in the
Mm.
teaching model how to perform the exercise, and then when we're cueing them, the teaching method is what gives them the context for the cues to make sense. So when I say shove your knees out on a squat, I've already taught them in the teaching progression of the squat why it's important for them to have their knees pushed out, why we want them to be that way. So when they're squatting and I say knees out, now they have context, they understand what that means, and they can make that adjustment. I see a lot of beginner coaches or people that are maybe starting strength enthusiasts, and they watch the videos and they want to teach somebody how to squat, and then they'll just be yelling cues at people. They'll be coming up out of the bottom just like hips, 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 and like the person who they're teaching doesn't know what that means.
Doesn't know what that means. Yeah.
So if, for people that don't know, the hips cue is to cue what we call hip drive. It's the way you get up out of the bottom of the squat, but you need that teaching method to explain to somebody this is how you come up out of the bottom of the squat. This is called hip drive, and this is the strongest way for you to get yourself up out of the bottom of the squat. So so then later on, when they're squatting and I say hips, use your hips, something like that, they know what that means, and they can kind of go from there. But yeah, that's essentially how we teach that to people is we have a teaching method that we use to get them up to speed quick. And then through experience, you kind of develop cues and to kind of remind them how to do the lifts correctly.
Yeah, that's enlightening to me. I wasn't totally clear on how that works because I've never worked with a starting strength coach like from the beginning, multiple
Mhm.
sessions. But the idea that you have, again, you said it's systematic before. It is
Yeah,
systematic. A teaching phase, progression, you understand why you're using a certain foot stance, putting your legs this way, whatever. And then the cues are just reminders of that. Okay. So now
correct.
what if someone, I know there are coaches that do online programming. I think you do as
Yeah,
well,
I
right?
do,
You do
yeah.
online. How do you coach someone who's fully remote, who's just not in the area and getting started for the first time remotely?
So it's harder,
Yeah.
it definitely is, and we tell people up front. I mean, if you're going to be honest with somebody, you have to tell them that, like, look, this online coaching thing, it can work, it can be beneficial, it's definitely better than nothing, but it's not as good as in-person coaching, and it just can't be because of the delay, the fact that I can't be there in person and give you real time feedback. As you're screwing something up, I can fix it in person. So in person is always going to be better. The biggest drawback that I tell people to online coaching, and it gets back to that learning the lifts thing, is that it's going to take more time. It's going to take longer because of the inherent delay. So I'll give you an example. Like when I first started coaching people online, somebody would post a video for me. I use an app called True Coach. So they'll upload a video to True Coach, and it'll be their squat. Then I'll take a look at it, and their stance is a little too wide or it's a little messed up. So then I'll write back to them like, hey, good job, but your stance is a little bit too wide. I need you to narrow it up a little bit next time on your next set of squats. So then 48 to 72 hours goes by, they do their next workout, and I check their video, and now they're squatting with like their heels almost touching. So I'm like, okay, that's way too narrow.
And then I tell them, all right, now I need you to widen your stance out again because it's not quite right. So then again, a third video comes 48, 72 hours later, and now their stance is too wide. So now we've already wasted about a week's worth of training just to get
Uh,
their stance right. But we do get it right. We do fix it. Online coaching is great because we will get your form where it
yeah.
needs to be, but you just got to understand that the limitations are those are the limitations. It's going to take more time to get it right. And if
And
you
I
don't
just,
have a
yeah,
coach like
yeah,
you were asking before, you can do this stuff. It's just going to take a lot longer. There's a lot of trial and error to learning how to do this stuff correctly. I for the most part tried to teach myself how to do it correctly in the beginning, and it's just hard. It takes a long time. Part of what you're paying for with a coach is just that time saving aspect.
expertise in that. Yeah. So a couple things you mentioned. First, I imagine it's a good learning experience for you as a coach, that whole trial and error back and forth to be like, maybe next time I can give them very precise, like, 10 inches, take a
Yeah.
ruler, measure 10,
Yeah.
right? Kind of how you communicate is an interesting thing. The other is that, you reminded me, and just for the listener, I've never not had some form of coach along the way. Like to this
Mhm.
day, I'm in a barbell club where I can post my video and get form feedback from a very good coach, Andy Baker, who's from the world of starting strength. And
Yep.
I think anybody should do that, even if it's a budget thing and you have to do it online, it's a little bit less, whatever. It's totally worth it,
Yep.
or at least getting a refresh. So, all right, I know we're running low on time, and we had some technical glitches early, but couple questions left. This is the question I ask every guest. Is there something you wish I had asked you, and what is your answer?
No, I think you covered most of your bases in terms of like, we wanted to talk about like what starting strength is and that sort of thing.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you covered most of it. For folks listening who are interested, where can they learn about you, your specific gym, you and your work, and anything you want them to kind of look up related to starting strength?
So for me personally, I'm on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, and our website is aninostrong.com. And anything related to starting strength, you can also find me on the starting strength website. But yeah, anything related to starting strength, go to startingstrength.com. There's forums, thousands of articles, tons of information, tons of videos. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have any articles up there by any chance
I
on
don't have
starting
any
strength?
articles,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just curious. All right, so we'll put all your handles up there, but definitely your website aninostrong.com. If you guys go there, you can find out about both local if you're in Moodus, Connecticut area, which is kind of what would you say? It's kind of southern, not far from I-91, a little to the
Yeah,
east.
it's
Yeah.
southeastern Connecticut.
Yeah, southeastern Connecticut. And if you're not, you can get remote coaching from Cody. And man, thank you so much for coming on. It was a blast.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about the technical issues.
It's all good.
Thanks for having me.